Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast with Ollie Rock. Today's episode was a special one. I sat down with Julia Taylor, who's the current Chief Legal Officer at Coupa and a fellow Berkeley Law alum. Her career is pretty incredible. After spending 4 years in BigLaw after graduating from law school, Julia joined Eventbrite, where she was the first lawyer that joined the company. She was there for almost 12 years and helped lead the company's $1.8 billion IPO in 2018 and was eventually promoted to General Counsel and Chief People Officer. Julia's philosophy centers around remaining composed, being pragmatic, and becoming an expert on the business that she's supporting. We hope you enjoy the episode. Hey, Julia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ollie. I'm so glad to be here.
It is so great to be speaking with a Berkeley Law alumni, especially as a 2L who just finished his finals, and you've achieved so much. So first question is how do you look back on your experience at Berkeley Law?
First, I want to say congratulations on being halfway through law school. You just have 1.5 semesters left to go, so congratulations.
Nice.
And then second, just really quickly before we get into things, I do want to just make a quick disclosure, because I am a lawyer after all, that what my opinions are my own. They do not reflect Coupa or Eventbrite or any of my other employers. So anything I share is my own view and opinion.
Sweet.
And to your question, how do I think back on Berkeley Law? It was probably one of my favorite times in my life. It just felt like intellectual Candyland. There were so many smart people there. I mean, that was the thing that I think my jaw dropped about how smart and hardworking and interesting all of the other students were. And everybody, I will just say, people came to law school with very different purposes. There were some people who came in, knew that they wanted to be an environmental lawyer, and they knew that from their application, and they studied the right courses and went on, and they're doing that now. There were a number of students in my class who knew they wanted to go into public service, and they're doing that now. There were people who knew they wanted to be plaintiffs' attorneys, or that they wanted to go into technology law. And it was just such an inspiring, committed group of students. And so I had the best time. And I will say I made incredible friends when I was in law school.
Wow.
And I will count, there's a group of 7 of us women, and we were in the same section, large section. And we have gone away together every year for a weekend away since, I think, 2007. So we're going on 20 years of being each other's sounding boards and biggest cheerleaders. And every single woman is doing something very different in their careers. But we sort of hold each other up and push each other forward, and a soft place to land, and we laugh. And anyway, I made incredible friends, and I was just in awe of the student body and the faculty.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I would echo that. It's just being surrounded by so many smart people is it can be kind of intimidating. And yeah, it does seem like people are doing so many different things. Some people want to go into politics. There's a huge public interest focus, obviously a lot of big law recruiting. Cool. Well, let's jump into your career, Julia. I know that before law school, you did some campaign work, and you were working for actually Senator Dianne Feinstein as well as Jerry Brown. So did you want to be a politician initially?
I did not. I think I've always known that I wanted to be a lawyer. And I was actually sitting for the LSAT in the fall of my senior year in college. And the second week of school is when 9/11 happened of my senior year in college. And I just had this feeling that I knew that I wanted to be a lawyer. I hoped that I would have a long and hopefully rewarding career as an attorney. And I wanted to take a break. I wanted to do something. I wanted to, serve isn't quite the right word, but I wanted to do something that felt a little bit more connected to a very strange time in American history. And so I decided to work on Capitol Hill. So I worked in Senator Feinstein's DC office for about 3 years, and I learned a ton. She was incredibly disciplined,
Wow.
really, really constructive. very practical. I think back at that time, and it's a different world than what the Hill is like today. But she always wanted to find a solution. She was just very practical and worked incredibly hard and had very high expectations for her staff. So it was a wonderful first job because I learned from and got to watch somebody who cared deeply, who was motivated, I think, by a desire to make California a better place, and who wasn't afraid to cross the aisle. She wasn't afraid to compromise on certain things to get uh, things done, letting she never let perfection be the enemy of progress. She said, we have to make progress. We have to keep going. Let's find a way. And she would work the rest of us under the table, even though she was, in her late 70s. I think the time I was working for her. It was really a wonderful experience. And then I moved back to California from DC because my then fiance was going to Berkeley Business School. So I moved back to the Bay Area, and Senator Feinstein was kind enough to introduce me to then Mayor Jerry Brown. He was the mayor of Oakland at the time. He had been the governor, and he was the sitting mayor of Oakland, and he was running for California Attorney General. And I
Wow.
worked on his campaign, and it was a small, scrappy campaign. The campaign manager was his wife, Ann Gust. They got married I think, third week on the job. So I was sort of thrown into a campaign, a small, scrappy campaign, and a new marriage. And it was so much fun. I mean, Jerry Brown is one of the most original thinkers I've been around. And I feel so lucky. I feel like Dianne Feinstein and Jerry Brown, they're sort of like the yin and the yang of how I approach problem solving. Feinstein just incredibly determined and practical and gets it done. And Jerry Brown just like the art of the possible and
Wow.
creative thinking and just this joy
Yeah.
and curiosity. So he ended up winning for attorney general, and then went on and ran for governor again and won, and served capably as the governor. Um, and yeah, incredible
Yeah.
experience.
That's like forgive me, but for speaking about how like this was 20 years ago, and you're speaking about this with so much passion and how profound of an effect that they both had on you, and it seems like you remember the experience vividly. So I mean, that's pretty impressive the way like how highly you speak of them.
They both had a huge impact on how I see the world. And I will say, in particular, Jerry and his wife Anne, I had the unique pleasure of being able to attend a lot of events, fundraising events, with a lot of lawyers. And both Jerry and Anne are lawyers. Anne was she was the general counsel and then ended up being the chief administrative officer at the Gap. And she had just retired from a really incredible legal career when she married Jerry and took over to run his campaign. And they, between the two of them, inspired me to become a lawyer. I sort of
Wow.
knew I wanted it, but I was like, oh, but I do like working in government and in politics. I enjoy it. And they said, you will never regret going to law school.
Wow.
You learn how to think in a new way. You were around people who will challenge you and push you and enable you to solve problems you didn't think you could solve.
Yeah.
And I got to go to a lot of fundraisers where there were really smart, interesting lawyers. And I found myself very gravitated toward the sort of Silicon Valley tech legal world, um, and the entrepreneurs that they supported and
Yeah.
helped build compliant companies for. So they both encouraged me to go to law school, and I was lucky enough to be admitted to Berkeley Law. So I didn't have to move, and I could go to just an incredible school. Berkeley's such a special place.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were right that about everything they said about law school. And they also Anne and Jerry created a really incredible community around them of smart, interesting thinkers, and many of them were lawyers. And so I feel like I got to get a sense of what it might be like to be part of a both um, effective but also very principled legal community.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's awesome to hear. And I mean, the fact that your fiance was at Berkeley and you got into Berkeley law, like, that's pretty nice to hear.
We both felt very, very lucky to be able to attend Berkeley.
Yeah. And so you said you were fascinated by Silicon Valley, entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
tech, stuff like that. And obviously you went into Big Law at one of the best firms for it at Latham in Menlo Park. So as I guess talk me through what you were thinking about in law school. Like I guess you went into law school knowing you wanted to do Big Law at and do the transactional side, or what were you thinking?
Yeah, good question. I knew that I wanted to get some experience at a larger law firm because I just felt like it could bring me, it could open doors, first of all, but you get good training. You get good training from really smart people. You figure out like how you're going to develop your practice. You figure out at the end of the day, um, I feel like the most satisfied professionals solve problems that they like solving. And I wanted to figure out which were the problems that I liked solving the most. And I went to Latham knowing pretty certainly that I wanted to do transactional, but not sure within transactional, like sort of what specialty. And I was excited by Latham because they had a really wide sort of spectrum of clients. They had some massive public companies, tons of small startups, and everything kind of in between. And they had hardware, software, they kind of counseled the full gamut of companies. I thought, you know what, I could probably get a lot of good experience there. And I did. It was a lot of fun. I think my first or second week on the job, I was staffed on an IPO for a company and I got to work on an
Wow.
IPO, which was really fun. I did M&A. I drafted, and I'll tell you, this is interesting. This is going to sound so boring, but I worked on a lot of terms of use for companies and a lot of small companies who didn't have a terms of use. And I realized what I loved, which was thinking about the fourth and fifth and the sixth step of a business. You kind of really have to understand a company's business model to draft the terms of use. Yes, maybe 60% of it is boilerplate and, like waivers of liability and all that, limitations of liability. It's like a lot of it's stock legal language. But the most interesting stuff is describing what the business does and what the business doesn't do and what happens when things go wrong and how that company interacts with their users. And I loved it. I would just like
Oh,
geek out, talk to the founders and be like, well, what about this? What about this? And ask me all these questions. And you're like, oh, we haven't thought about that yet. Oh, I don't know. And so I am not entrepreneurial by nature, but I love being around entrepreneurs. I love people who think anything's possible and who have the courage and the determination to like just grind and make it happen. They have a
it's
big
amazing.
idea and they go after it. So I like being adjacent to those kind of people. So I just really liked that kind of like, okay, I'm kind of getting into the nitty gritty of how the business works.
Yeah.
It's not like strict legal work, but it's important like foundation for a business in particular, like an internet business, software business. So I realized I really liked that. I got to do tons of technology transactions and licensing agreements and kind of the full gamut. And I realized I was kind of more interested in the business side. I would do an acquisition, I'd work on an acquisition at Latham, and then I would think, oh, I wonder how that worked out. Like, was that a successful acquisition? Did the teams work well together? Was the investment thesis, did it play out? Did that founder still stay? And I would find myself like always wanted to kind of like look in the rearview mirror. I loved that part of it. And I loved like I wanted to be part of the team that was building something and not
Yeah.
supporting the building of something. Um, and so in 2013, I had just had my first kid, and I heard about this opportunity at Eventbrite, which at the time was a really small company. They had an office in San Francisco. They just opened an office in London. They were trying to figure out how to scale, and they just built out a sales team, and they needed a lawyer to support the sales team and figure out Salesforce and figure out playbooks and standard contracts for customers and train the sellers on how to talk about the legal provisions in the contract. And I took a leap. I really liked the energy in the office. Obviously, working at a startup. Back in the
Were
day,
they?
the offices used to be really cool. Um, and I don't know if people are, I don't know if people go to the, like if people go to the offices anymore, I don't know what the like kind of energy is like, but at that time it was sort of like the peak of that Silicon Valley fun, um, ping pong and all the food and very different from a law firm. And I really liked the mission of events and
Yeah.
giving best in class technology to like one of the most fundamental things that we do as humans, which is to gather in person and to jointly experience something, whether it's a music concert or cooking class or learning how to knit or whatever it is. But like we were as humans meant to be sitting around the fire together looking at each other in the eyes. And so I love the idea that yes, it was technology and I know technology and I like technology, and it was people collectively experiencing something in person. So important.
Yeah.
So I really liked it. Yeah.
Really interesting stories. I have a couple questions. So
Yeah.
I'm curious how the opportunity came up. Was Eventbrite a client of Latham's? And yeah, I'll start with that.
No, Eventbrite used Goodwin at the time. I know you worked at Goodwin for a time, so we were a Goodwin client. I heard about it on just like a job board. I can't remember which one.
Wow.
It was just like a job board, and I was sort of soft looking because I was like, I really think I want to be in house. I like the business side. Those are the types of problems I want to solve, and I want to grow roots at a place and really invest and lean in and be part of growing something.
Yeah.
So I was soft looking and found it on a just job board and just applied.
Yeah, it's also like really fascinating that you started out as like sort of a commercial counsel. Like I'm a former rep, so I was at AE
Mhm.
for 7 years, and like that has always fascinated me. With like working alongside the attorneys to get deals across the line, and so it's just fascinating that you started as commercial, like more on the commercial side, as opposed to, even though I read online you did a lot of corporate work, perhaps later on, I'm not sure,
No, you're
but
right.
started out working like with the sales team. It sounds like, which is pretty
I
cool.
I did, and I loved it. I loved it because the Eventbrite sales team at that period was full of all these young, fun, passionate, cool people. That I was definitely not. I was not in the cool category, but Eventbrite was trying to hire folks and did hire folks who kind of had experience in the categories we were selling into. So somebody who had worked at comedy clubs, folks who were really involved in the music industry, folks who were sort of adjacent to sports, who had a lot of connections in sports. So they were selling in and were able to speak the language of the event creators that they were selling into. Um, they were the sales team was eager to learn. A lot of them had never dealt with a lawyer before, right? You were at a little more advanced, sort of larger companies and more B2B. And even though Eventbrite, the sales, we were selling into businesses, we were selling into very small businesses. If you think about the typical event creator, um, many of them didn't have a lawyer. Many of them were 2 or 3 person businesses who were following their passions. Um, and so the sales team they were young and eager and fun and interesting, and they wanted to win, and I like to win, and trying to figure out how we could all collectively win for Eventbrite, and for the communities in which the company was operating was fun.
Yeah, and I know the founder's name is also Julia. Like, what was it like working with Julia, I guess, in the early days?
Yeah, I didn't work with her as much when I first joined because I was just a corporate counsel. I worked mostly with our chief revenue officer at the time. And then after a couple of years, we worked very, very closely together. I will say it's difficult when your boss has the same name as you. So in my Eventbrite years, I went by JT almost exclusively. Everybody knows me as JT. And she is an incredible leader and human being. And just, I admire her so much to pick up from LA and move up to the Bay Area and create a company with her husband. At the time, I think they'd just gotten engaged. And she cares deeply about people. And I think that's probably what I will take away the most from her is her people-centered approach to leadership. Because people
Yeah.
do their best work when they feel seen and they feel valued and trusted and they feel like they have a manager or a leadership team that wants them to grow and succeed and thrive and do their best work, or like use a role as an opportunity to learn something new, to bridge to another career option. And she cares deeply about people. So
Wow. Yeah,
she was great.
I saw some of her talks like around the time of the IPO in 2018, and she just like is such a good speaker and so charismatic. But I do want to ask you, Julia, like for folks who are, let's say, in Big Law and maybe they know they want to go in house, and like you said, they value that experience, but they're trying to make a determination on like what kind of company should I join? What stage of the company's growth should I join it at? Like it's hard like to vet out companies. Like from a high level, how would you advise like young lawyers to vet these companies and make these decisions if they're going in house?
Good question. I mean, size really like is important when you think about what size of a team do you want to be working alongside. Some companies, like you think of Google, thousands of lawyers, right? And some legal teams are a team of one. If you want like deep stability and you want to have like a deep expertise, like I want to be the product counsel for this product dealing with data privacy issues at Google, right? If you know that, then you should go and you should do that. If you like variety, if you like to be scrappy, if you like to jump in and just be the like voice of raging common sense, I would go to a smaller company. I like that. That resonated with me being in a smaller startup. And I will say, speaking from, I've now transitioned to like sort of a larger company where we have 3,200 employees and a much larger legal team. But it's still a legal team where people have an opportunity to solve a variety of problems, right? You don't get pigeonholed. We still have a few like teams of one and opportunities for folks on the legal team at Coupa to bridge into other areas and learn and grow and try. I knew that I did not know exactly what I wanted to do. And so I thought, well, a smaller company will probably provide me a lot of opportunities to try
Yeah.
and to get that variety of experience.
It's yeah, for sure. It's scary, right? Like the attraction to like a Google or a Coupa is definitely there because of the stability, but like you just when 90% of startups fail, it's like so scary to be the first lawyer or the only lawyer
Yeah.
and just taking that risk. But there's a lot of upside with things like equity. And I mean, it's just hard like for folks that maybe haven't been in the workforce to look at things like, is this a second time founder? Who are the VCs back in the company? Like stuff like that really matters, but it's just hard to know to ask those questions.
It's hard to know. And so understanding how much runway does this company have? Do they have a board of directors who's like poised and invested enough to make the company successful? How engaged is the board of directors? To your point, like, is this a first time founder or is this somebody has a successful track record? I mean, the good news is if things go smash, the lawyers are often the last people in seat. So you typically would get a little bit of time to figure out what your next job is. And you also have an interesting story to tell. And I will just share from my experiences at Eventbrite, where we went through some really tough times during COVID. Um,
Wow.
I learned more and learned more about leadership and creative problem solving, and probably more about myself during those first sort of like 12 months after COVID, like right as COVID hit until we sort of figured out how to keep the company going. You learn a lot. And I think the number one thing I learned is you can't be afraid, right? And so these types of problems are all solvable. And yeah, there's risk to like putting your career and
Yeah.
taking a job with an unknown company. Um, for me, Eventbrite was small and it worked out, and I got to have I think about the arc of my story at Eventbrite, and small, scrappy startup growing. We did acquisitions and integrated companies from, different parts of the world, South America and Europe. Um, had an IPO that was very successful. Um, had some growing pains right after we became
Yeah.
public, but we're kind of ironing them out, and then just hit a brick wall with COVID, because obviously social distancing and events don't really go hand in hand. Had to lay off half the company and do 2 rounds of financing over a period of 2 months, I think. Tried to move towards, online events, and it was a challenge. But you
Yeah.
just have to keep going. Like you pick yourself up each day and you find a new way to put yourself out there and keep solving problems. I mean, that's at the end of the day what in-house lawyers do, is they solve problems. And so to the earlier question about what size of a company, what risk, what problems do you want to solve, right? Do you want to solve very specific niche problems, and you have your swim lane, and you don't go in that person's swim lane, but you solve these 6 things for this company and you do it day in and day out? To me, that doesn't really light my hair on fire. I kind of want a lot of pots on the stove. I sort of want to be stirring a lot of pots and learning and trying something new, and growing other leaders on the team to try new things, and having the flexibility to do that. And when you join the right size legal team, and you have a leader who believes in growing and developing the team, you do get a lot of opportunity to stretch outside your comfort zone and, in a safe way, make mistakes, try again, keep going.
Yeah. Amazing. And man, I was reading about the layoffs on Wikipedia, and about just like the background on Eventbrite. And man, it's really tough. I can't even imagine what the days were like at that time. I do, if you don't mind, I want to just backtrack. So you were at Eventbrite for 5 years, and then they IPO'd for $1.8 billion. I mean, it's just crazy to think like you just left Latham, first lawyer at this company, and then you led all the legal and compliance work for the IPO. It's just crazy to think about. So talk to me like in these 5 years, I know that we could probably dive into so many different things, but like from a high level, how did you how did you prepare to get to a point where you were leading an IPO?
Yeah, I'll just make one clarification that I was not the general counsel during the IPO. They had hired a woman named Sam Harnett, who was an incredible leader and mentor to me. So she was the GC, um, and but she was sort of doing more of the business and the board work, and I was doing the S1 and all the diligence and the compliance work. Um, how It was wild, and it was I the whole time I kept feeling like, am I really who's trusting me to do this? And we had Goodwin Proctor as our counsel, and they very capably helped us through the really specific securities compliance rules and disclosures and obligations. So I was never alone. And you have bankers who are helping you with the marketing piece and the financial models and doing all of that and figuring out the pricing and the marketing strategy. And then you have lawyers, and you also have the bankers, the underwriters, lawyers. So Wilson Sonsini was on the other side. So you were surrounded by a lot of really smart people who love doing IPOs.
Wow.
So I, um, being an in-house lawyer, in particular in that kind of role where you're very corporate focused, your job is to be an expert on the company. What's the company's business model? Who are our customers? What do they care about? Where are we trying to accelerate growth? What are those levers? What is the market for those growth areas? You are the expert on the business, and surround yourself with people who are experts on the other things. Whether it's SEC compliance, which at the time I knew some about, but not a ton, but I certainly knew who to call if I had a question. And we had a great team around us, and we worked really hard, a lot of late nights, a lot of digging in the old files of the company and producing documents and writing disclosures, and a lot of calls, a lot of drafting, and it was great fun. It was great fun. And I mean, that would be one of the things I would take out of it is like, make sure you surround yourself
Yeah.
with people who like to work and who enjoy what they're doing, because it makes all the difference. Like, I love what I do. I have never had a day where I was like, oh gosh, maybe I'm in the wrong, or maybe I'm in the wrong career,
Yeah.
or the wrong company. I really love what I do. And you can tell when people actually love what they do and when you want to be sort of in the foxhole with them, so to speak, solving problems. And so I had a great team around me for the Eventbrite IPO, including folks at Eventbrite, um, Goodwin, Wilson, Goldman Sachs. It was like the the process kind of, once you get out of the station, like the train just keeps on a going because they know how to do this and they do this day in and day out. Um, but it was wildly fun and challenging, but very meaningful and rewarding.
Were you there at the stock exchange, like ringing the bell and all that stuff?
I was.
What was going through your head?
My shoes were very uncomfortable, and so I made a big mistake, never to be made again. Break your shoes in, ladies. Um, I was really proud. Again, I was really proud of the company. Um, um, we had spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about our customers, event creators in our S1, and celebrating them in the lead up to the public offering. And we wanted, to the greatest extent possible, to feel like this was their success as well. Because I mean, this from sales. You don't have a company if you don't have revenue,
For
and
sure.
customers matter. And so we wanted to take this as a moment to build trust with our customers. So it was
Amazing.
really fun. Well, so what was going through my head was, wow, I can't believe I took a leap of faith on this small little startup, Eventbrite. I'm so glad that I did. I'm so glad to be doing it with people who care deeply about their work, but who also don't take themselves too seriously. Like, it's really a fun, um, optimistic group of executives who was up there on
Yeah.
the New York Stock Exchange podium.
Love to hear it. Wow, what a journey. Let's talk about in-house careers. So obviously you've been promoted several times at Eventbrite. I mean, from to GC, and CPO, Chief People Officer. Like, so for folks that are in-house, like how do you think strategically about your career to where you can set yourself up to be promoted and to take advantage of opportunities that pop up?
Hmm. That's a good question. I think do really good work in your role. Um, Deeply understand the business. I think that's your number one job, is to deeply understand the business. Unlike other sort of legal work, your relationships matter. You need to build trust across the business. If you're a product counsel, you need to build deep relationships with the product team and the engineering team. And if you're doing disclosures and maybe securities work, you need to have a strong relationship with the marketing team. They need to be able to speak about you when your manager wants to put you up for promotion. That's who they're going to go ask. Hey, how does Ali show up when you get a question about, can I say this in a marketing campaign?
Yeah.
I think raise your hand, like show yourself to be a curious, hungry business leader. At the end of the day, in-house lawyers are business leaders. Their expertise is whatever sort of legal function they're driving. But you need to be committed to the mission of the company and committed to growing the company. At the end of the day, every single employee is trying to grow the company. And lawyers, whatever your role is, you're trying to grow it safely and thoughtfully and responsibly. And so show that you know how to do that. Be creative, right? There is a way to get to yes on everything, right? There's yes, full stop. Can I do this? Yes. Like there's yes, and let's make like a couple of tweaks, like let's change this language, or yes, and let's like move this disclosure up here, or yes, and whatever. Show yourself to be creative, and at every turn, try to demonstrate to your business partners, because at the end of the day, when I want to promote somebody, I'm not like looking at the work they do for me. I'm looking at the work they do for the company. And so I'm talking to the chief marketing officer, and I'm talking to the head of sales, and I'm saying, like, what are you hearing? What are you seeing?
Yeah.
What could be better? What do you, how do, like do you want to, what do you want to replicate about this person, and what do you wish they'd stop doing? So show yourself to be somebody who wants to drive growth and who shows up creatively to solve whatever the business opportunity is. And this is just me personally, but I think it's so important for in-house lawyers to be calm, right? You can't have your hair on fire. Nothing is really like, oh, this is a catastrophe. And you hear about, I'm sure you dealt with some lawyers when you were in sales who'd be like, this is the worst red line I've ever seen. And you're just like cut the histrionics, like let's get into it and let's figure out like what are the 4 things we need to get done on the next like turn, in the next
Yeah.
like revision of the agreement. Like what are the 4 things we've got to get done to get the deal done?
Yeah.
Be practical. Like I'm telling you, being ruthlessly practical, like that is the number one quality that will get someone promoted under me.
Interesting. Yeah, and it comes through in like the way you're describing like Dianne Feinstein. You were like, she's a ruthless doer. And it
Yep.
sounds like you carry that philosophy with you, and that your advice is really pragmatic.
Yep.
So
I mean, there's very little that's going to sink a company, right? And from a risk perspective. And like when I think about risk, like the risk sort of portfolio, or when you're analyzing an opportunity, you say, okay, what's the worst that could happen? Like, what's the like, okay, is it like a $15,000 fine, or is it we get a legal letter, right? Or is it like this is actually like we could be delisted as a public company, right? Right.
yeah,
And it's usually somewhere in between there. But like, what's the worst case? Like, what's the thing that's going to happen that we're all afraid of? Let's talk it out. Let's put it out there. We can't just have this like scary, shadow of risk. Like, what is it? And then what's the likelihood that it happens? Right?
yeah,
If it's a really bad risk and it's really likely to happen, obviously you figure out a way around that. You try not to do that thing, right? If it's like a $15,000 fine and a low risk of it, I'm like, do it all day, right? Do it again and at some point, maybe you need to make a tweak here and there, but you got to be comfortable with risk.
yeah. And it sounds like maybe that's what attracted you to the commercial side and all the transactional work you're doing, where it's like you got to get stuff through the door to bring in revenue.
You've got to get it
So
done. You've got to get the deal done, and you got to get it done. My philosophy is always get it done in as few steps as possible. Like if we know we're going to get to this liability cap and this indemnification on a breach, like see through. Don't take every single step, because that's just a waste of everyone's time. It's kind of annoying. Like, where are we actually going to go? Let's have those real conversations. Let's get there. We want the same thing. We want to get a deal done.
Yeah, amazing, amazing, Julia. While we're on the topic of Eventbrite, obviously you became GC in 2020, and then became GC and Chief People Officer. So before we move on to Coupa, I just want to ask, like, what else can you share with our audience about your almost 12 years at Eventbrite that you would want to leave with, I don't know, folks that want to be GCs or just want to go into capital markets or want to lead a huge company like Eventbrite?
Yeah. I will say I adored the people that I worked with at Eventbrite. Lifelong friends, um, people who I will cheer on and celebrate and be there if things, are tough for the rest of my life. So I think the quality of the people who were at Eventbrite was just incredible.
Wow.
In terms of some of the learnings, um, just like be ready for whatever the heck happens. I'll just share one story, which was one of the more interesting points in my career. It was January of 2021, and it was like a week or two before the Trump was leaving office, and Biden was going to be sworn in. And I woke up to like all these texts from Julia Hartz, and she was like, "What are we going to do about vaccines?" And I was like, "What? I don't know what's happening." And she sent me all these news articles about how um, health organizations were using Eventbrite registration for vaccine appointments.
Oh,
And like tens of thousands of vaccine appointments were being, and you may not know this, but most of the event creators on Eventbrite sign themselves up. They create an account and then they create an event. The vaccination was the event in this case. And we don't have we don't have interaction with them other than them accepting our terms of service and then them publishing the event. And we were collecting health information through our site, and we were not HIPAA compliant. We had never thought, oh yeah, HIPAA compliance, that's something we should do. We should be HIPAA compliant. It was never relevant to us. But it was January of 2021, and they were trying to get through millions and millions and millions of vaccine appointments. And Eventbrite seemed like a good place that could handle the high volume of people racing to their computers to try and register for a vaccine appointment.
wow.
So I'm faced with this after we'd gone through the year of layoffs and fundraising and trying to figure out what a new business strategy would be in this moment. And we're like, okay, got a breath. And then, okay, we're collecting health information. And so the choice, as like at the end of the day was my call what we did. Do we keep collecting health information and enable people to get vaccines? Do we pull all of the registrations for people who, and I don't know if you remember what that was like when people were desperately trying to get vaccines and people were, driving all over to get their first vaccine appointment. And do we pull all of those events? Right? Do we
What did you
find another
do?
way? Although I put out, immediately started calling friends I had at law firms who had really good regulatory practices, and in particular, those that had relationships with the Department of Health and Human Services.
Ah,
And so I got on the phone through a good friend of mine with a partner at Hogan Lovells in Washington, D.C., who had worked on the HIPAA regulations. And so within an hour, I was on the phone with her and I said, holy smokes, we do not want to pull all these. I don't want to be responsible for canceling tens, and at that point, it was getting to be hundreds of thousands of vaccine appointments in like the biggest
wow.
public health crisis of the century. Like that just it feels like antithetical to who we are as a company and the right thing to do, right, as a corporate citizen. So she's like, okay. And she talked me through the process of getting an exemption, a short-term exemption. And so we had to go before HHS and we were trying to get it all done before the new administration took office, because they would probably change leadership. And so we had like a week and a half period where we were like pedal to the metal in trying to figure out how we could make our case to HHS. Thankfully, we did. We got an exemption, and we were able to keep all of those appointments. But like, who would have thought that I'd wake up one January morning and be knee deep in HIPAA exemptions? And like, that's why I love my job, because I didn't think that that was something that I was going to tackle that day. And it was fun and interesting and challenging, and it made a difference.
Yeah.
And
And sorry.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry, go
When you say like, one of the biggest things is like remaining calm as a GC, as a CLO, like, were you calm in that moment?
yeah, yeah. I didn't know the answer, but I knew I could figure out options. And that's
Yeah.
what I say, like, because like, I don't know. I just feel like nobody wants their lawyer to be freaking out. It's just like, nobody wants that. Stay calm. Like, and I think getting um, freaking out about what's in front of you doesn't help solve the problem faster in most cases. So
Yeah.
you take a beat. Yeah, take a beat. What do I know? Right? What do I know? Okay, I know people are signing up. I know we're not HIPAA compliant. I know this is like getting bigger by the minute. Every single minute it's getting bigger and bigger. They're coming to us. We don't have a good way of stopping them from using Eventbrite at this moment, because how do we know? Like vaccines, and we don't let any. It was like, well, they're coming. We're not HIPAA compliant. We need options. Okay, what are the options?
Love
Right? And
it.
that's like, I look back on it, and was I probably a little bit scared? Yeah, I was scared. But like, that's when you get to be brave. That's when you get to like show up and like do the job you were hired to do. Solve big, novel, thorny problems.
I love it. I don't know why I keep thinking of like, when you keep saying like you want a leader that remains calm, I keep thinking of like a paramedic or a police officer showing up
What?
and freaking out. Like that's the
Or a
last thing you want.
pilot, or a pilot, there's turbulence. Like, woo, like, no, you want a
Yeah.
pilot like, we're gonna hit some turbulence. I've got you. I was trained for this.
Yeah.
And that
100%.
lawyers need to be
Love it.
trained for that kind of unknown, like, risk. You kind of do the risk mitigation exercise. Okay, let's do this assessment. Here are three options. I think option B is the best. Let's figure out how to like execute the hell out of this.
Love it. Love it. They don't teach you that in law school.
No, they don't. But I do think the like environment of like intensity and thinking under pressure, like with exams, um, the Socratic method being called on and sort of having to think on your feet. It's not bad preparation.
I totally agree. I feel like, and schools are starting to get softer on this type of stuff. And I completely agree. Like the pressure does, like it does, it builds thick skin, to be
Yeah,
frank. Um,
totally.
aw- awesome. So cool. Well, you've been at Coupa for 8 months now. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And man, your career is just so amazing. I guess, when did you know it was time to leave Eventbrite? And maybe you could tell me like what's your day to day like at Coupa these days?
Yeah. So in January of this year, 2025, I was having dinner with my family, and my now 11-year-old said, "Well, Mom, how long have you been at Eventbrite?" And I was like, "It'll be 12 years." And from the mouths of babes, she said, 12th grade is when you graduate, Mom. And I was like, "What do you mean?" She was like, "I think it's time to move on." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Tell me more." She was like, "Well, I don't know. I don't know, but it seems like you've been there quite a long time. You started as a kindergartner and now you're a 12th grader." And I was like, so I started thinking about it. And I did not want to leave because I loved the company. I loved the people I was working with. I loved the business. I really loved the business. Um, and I had hired and trained and developed an extraordinary group of lawyers. And I was taking up a lot of sunlight at the top. And I think everybody had earned the next rung up the ladder. And the main reason that I sort of opened myself up to leaving is because I wanted them all to get their due and take their seat at the table,
Wow.
grow. And the woman who took over for me, Lisa Gorman, she is the general counsel now at Eventbrite, and she was ready. And so it was like either I needed to leave or she needed to leave. And I thought it was better if I left. I will say it's a heck of a lot easier to have your first time GC role at a company you know really well and where you're trusted and where you're not learning an entirely new business model and how to get things done and how to build relationships. So I wanted that for her because it would be her first time as general counsel, and she's doing such a spectacular job. So I was taking up a lot of space. I knew that. And so I had sort of said, okay, I'm going to start looking this year and sort of dusted off my resume, which was very dusty, very dusty. Um, and a week later, I got a call from the current CFO at Coupa, and he had worked at Eventbrite many, many years before. And he was on the finance side of the house at Eventbrite, supporting the sales team. So I had been on the commercial side, he'd been on the finance side. We were sort of like the guardrails for this growing sales organization. We worked really well together. We were both like super practical, low ego, wanted to get the job done, do it well. And he called. He said, "Hey, we have this role. Would you ever leave Eventbrite?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" The timing was wild. Um, and I adore Mike. He's a great guy. And to know already somebody on the executive team who's smart and a good human being went a long way in building my trust. And so I started the conversations and I learned more about the business and the history of the company and who the customers were and where the company was headed. And I got really excited and it worked out. And so it's been, 8 months, I think. Um, and
Yeah.
it's been fabulous.
Amazing. It's cool how I guess I noticed like both of these massive successful companies are women led, and this is where you spent the bulk of your career. So that's pretty cool to see.
It did definitely build my confidence. Lee Turner is Coupa's CEO, and she has a sales background. I don't know if you know that, Ali, but she spent
I
many
didn't.
many years running very successful sales organizations, and she is sharp and hardworking and just a really great leader. But having worked for a female CEO for so long, it did. I don't know why, but it just sort of changed. I was like, okay, all right, we've got a number of women leaders, and built my confidence.
Amazing. Amazing, Julia. Well, I guess thank you so much for talking about your career. Maybe we can just finish off briefly by talking about some of the extracurricular stuff you're involved with. I noticed that you serve on the alumni leadership board of the school you attended,
Marlboro.
Marlboro School.
Yep,
Sorry
Marlboro.
if I pronounced
Yep.
that. And also advisory board member of the Smithsonian Institution. So I guess which like why is participating in these like why is this meaningful for you?
Yeah. So I joined the Smithsonian Postal Museum Board in 2020. And the museum, in many ways, like Eventbrite, was struggling with what to do when you could not let people into your museum. How do you figure out how to create an engaging experience in almost all digital world? And so that's sort of why they were looking for somebody who could help them figure out how to navigate that time, and they needed someone for their nominating and governance board. And I had that experience from working at Eventbrite. And so I interviewed with a number of folks, and it was just everybody was so interesting. And have you ever been to the Postal Museum, Ollie?
Have it.
It's really cool. It's really cool. Next time you're in DC, you should definitely stop by. It's right next to Union Station by Capitol Hill, and it's the original post office for DC that they converted
Wow.
into this beautiful museum. And it's one of those museums that you can go to and you don't feel overwhelmed by. You know how you can go to one of those big and you're like, I'm just going to do this one little piece and feel bad about leaving after 2 or 3 hours. You can really do it justice in whatever time you have and get a good sense. And the thing that I love about our postal service is, it was founded before the country. It is in many ways responsible for the economic success that America has had, having interstate commerce and it flowing primarily through the Postal Service. And the Postal Service is actually a really progressive organization, one of the first organizations to hire Postal Service officers of all different races and backgrounds and religions and genders, like um, really cool history. And I knew very little about philately and stamps before I joined the museum board, but stamps are really such a fascinating expression of a culture, of the art, and the sort of culture that they want to express. And so it's like in the museum is part history, American History Museum, and it's part art museum and culture museum. Because if you think about like next time you get your mail, look at the stamps. Like they're really like such a wide variety of stamps. And it's an interesting reflection of who we are as a country and as a people.
Yeah,
So
I'll definitely check it out.
yeah, you definitely should. What your question was like? What's important about being involved?
Yeah, like what's meaningful about like doing these things outside of like your main line of work?
Yeah, good. Okay, that's a good question. What I would say is I get to learn things I would not learn otherwise. I get to meet really different people than I get to work with or the people who I socialize with. It's a really different cross section of folks who are on the advisory board of the museum. Um, and I get to give back. It's uh, get to help what I think is a really important institution, the Smithsonian Institution, navigate not only the choppy waters of COVID, but also government shutdowns, museum closed. We were supposed to have our big fundraiser in November, and the government was shut down, and we couldn't.
Wow.
And so, how do you support an organization that is charged with spreading knowledge in a free, like every single Smithsonian museum is free. And I love history. I love American history, and I think it's one of the like chief organizations responsible for preserving American history. And so I think that's a mission worth working towards and contributing to.
You're so patriotic.
Thank you. I guess I am. Yeah, I am. I
Yeah, awesome. And then the Marlborough School, hopefully I pronounced that right.
That's right.
So you attended that school,
Yeah.
and now you're on the board. Yeah.
Yeah, it's independent girls' school, 7 through 12 in Los Angeles. And I went there from 7th through 12th grade, and it was a great experience, like very rigorous academics. But they really tried to create uh, they tried to produce graduates who wanted to build durable, meaningful lives. Building character was really important. There was an honor code at the school, and so we talked a lot about, what it meant to do the right thing, whether someone was looking or not. How can we contribute to our communities and show up? Um, and so I really enjoyed my time there, and I wanted to give back. So I'm part of an alumni board that helps do fundraising and help the students and graduates. There's a lot of career development that we do to help folks find, the path that brings them the most joy.
Amazing. There's some really like notable alumni. Just kind of looking through the LinkedIn, it's really cool to see how many people have gone on to achieve so much success.
Yeah, it was a great experience.
Yeah, amazing. Cool, Julia. Well, thank you so much. I learned a lot during this podcast. I think like the biggest thing that spoke to me was just like it's funny because you talked so highly of Dan Feinstein, and I just like found that so much of what you've achieved, it seems like in certain ways, I feel like you were describing your philosophy around work and being pragmatic and being a doer and just getting things done. And I just really appreciate you sharing your career story with me.
Well, thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. Congratulations on balancing both law school and a podcast and internships. And wow.
Thank you so much, Julie. I appreciate it.